Friday and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today, as always. I'm thrilled to be joined, as always on Fridays, by Jessica Burbank. Jessica, good morning.
Good morning. Happy to be with you, Amber, and happy Rising Friday to everyone.
Happy Rising Friday. Let's get right into it. President Biden finally called on Israel to stop its campaign in Gaza without any other conditions from Hamas in return. In a phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Thursday, Biden urged an immediate ceasefire necessary to, quote, protect innocent civilians there and improve the humanitarian situation, per the White House. Biden's most forceful appeal to Netanyahu comes after the targeted killing of 7 aid workers by the IDF. The Israeli army dismissed the 2 soldiers they called responsible for the deaths of World Central Kitchen workers. The sharp words from the White House to Israel included a demand for Israel to address civilian harm, humanitarian suffering, and the safety of aid workers. He made clear that U.S. policy with respect to Gaza will be determined by the assessment of Israel's immediate action on these steps.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken told reporters this morning that he, Biden, and other U.S. officials have been briefed on Israel's investigation into the World Central Kitchen attack. Let's look.
It's very important that Israel is taking full responsibility for this incident. It's also important that it appears to be taking steps to hold those responsible accountable. Even more important is making sure that steps are taken going forward to ensure that something like this can never happen again. Prime Minister Netanyahu indicated to President Biden that Israel would be making further changes to its procedures to make sure that those who are providing assistance to people who so desperately need it in Gaza are protected. So we're going to be looking very carefully at what those steps are, how it achieves better deconfliction, better coordination, so that aid workers are protected.
So is this a shift in policy or a war of words? I'm kind of in the camp of war of words because all they've promised is to review what Netanyahu is doing if he doesn't comply with the next steps that they expect him to take. Now, I think when you have so many situations in the Gaza Strip where Israel has crossed the line of what we deem acceptable in terms of what can be done in war, and there have been excuses made for, Israel's actions. Israel has a right to defend itself. People have said war is hell. But we have certain standards and norms that the Biden administration has expressed, concern over. When we see Yemeni rebel groups attacking shipping, they say this is unacceptable. We need world order. But when it comes to the IDF's actions in the Gaza Strip and obvious humanitarian crises caused by the IDF and the Netanyahu administration, both can't be true at once. And so it seems to me that this is definitely a war of words until they actually shift policy. They're still funding Israel's operations in Gaza, which now have killed people one who is a U.S. citizen and many citizens of Western countries who are U.S. allies abroad.
Yeah, this is definitely the strongest statement they've made yet, but I'm curious to know what they mean when they say that U.S. policy is contingent on Israel making these changes. What policy specifically are they referring to? And does that mean that they're prepared to pull financial and weaponry support from Israel if they don't take greater steps to protect civilians from casualties? There's another interesting element here, which is that there's reporting from the New York Times that it was actually First Lady Jill Biden who has been pushing Joe Biden, the president, towards the position of the more progressive base of the Democratic Party on this issue. According to someone who was at a meeting with Muslim community members at the White House earlier this week, President Biden told a guest that the First Lady had told him to stop it now, in reference to the Israel offensive in Gaza. And then the question becomes as well, is Jill Biden saying that because she truly believes it? Or is she seeing the obvious shift in polling of where Americans stand on this issue, as well as the increasing success of these uncommitted voters in recent primaries who are clearly sending a signal to Biden that they're not happy with the U.S.'s policy on Israel? And so it seems like perhaps Jill Biden is reading the political tea leaves even better than her husband is.
Yeah, you had this classic iftar dinner that the White House holds during Ramadan. And these are kinds of events that the First Lady is very involved in. And they ended up having to cancel this dinner because many Muslim Americans refused to attend. And so I think an embarrassment like that maybe could be the real reason Joe Biden is now on this side. Maybe she's strategic and she sees that actually what gave Joe Biden the presidency in 2020 is that he ran on the more progressive policies that are supported from the progressive members of the Democratic Party, that getting those voters to come out really delivered him the presidency. When you look at the amount of young voters, the amount of Muslim voters, especially in Michigan and key swing states that showed up for Joe Biden, it would be smart strategically for Jill Biden to say, hey, I like being first lady. You should run on the same policies or the same brand of policies, progressive policies that got you in office, on that same set of values. And it seems that Joe Biden hasn't been doing that. So whether it's the embarrassment from this fancy dinner they like to hold to celebrate Ramadan, which is ridiculous to even try and hold this at this point in time when the Biden administration's position has been what it is in Gaza. But they tried to hold this dinner and it ended up being a huge embarrassment. So whether she's embarrassed or she sees strategically these policies are important, I think it does make sense that she stands where she does. Now, for Joe Biden and Antony Blinken to move forward now in supporting Israel, that would be insane for them to continually advocate for sending money to Netanyahu, for them to continually send weapons over to Netanyahu, given that they've said they don't support a pro-Palestinian state post-war. Now, they didn't change their position on funding after Netanyahu said that. So it seems that the line really here, if this is where the line is, the killing of the World Central Kitchen employees, including an American, it's kind of sad that that's where the line is. The line should have been when they said we're trying to abolish a pro-Palestinian or a Palestinian state post-war. So it is too little too late. I think for me, for a lot of progressives and a lot of Muslim Americans, it would have to be a major shift in policy. I think for him to get those voters back at this point, it might really be too little too late.
I wonder what you make of the reaction of some political commentators in response to this statement from President Joe Biden, or rather it's a readout from a call that he had with Netanyahu. But some of them are accusing him of leaving behind hostages by not making a ceasefire contingent on Hamas releasing the hostages that they still have left. Chris Cuomo on News Nation, for example, said that Biden is treating them as an afterthought because other political calculations and agendas have overtaken them. What is your reaction to that?
I mean, my reaction to that is there are thousands of Palestinians that have been taken hostage over the previous decade, over the previous half of the century, but even since October 7th in the occupied territories in the West Bank without explanation. You have reports from humanitarian workers saying that people are being sorted into categories, people who will be taken away, people who will be killed, people who will be put in prison. And so you have so many hostages that have been taken by the IDF. We're at this point where talking about the hostages that have been taken by Hamas on October 7th is a misunderstanding of what this conflict is about at this point, of what this genocide is about at this point, because it's so unequal, because you have 30,000 Palestinians who have been killed and some estimates of over 8,000 Palestinians that have been taken by the IDF that are hostages, but instead they call them prisoners with some implication that there was wrongdoing there. When in many cases, there's no trial, there's no crime committed. In many cases, these are people that have been taken, as described by the UNRWA, out of a school where they were sheltering, where they have fled to what they thought to have been a safe zone. And so, when you consider all of those circumstances, I think it's just dishonest to still make this about the hostages when so much has happened since the hostages have been taken on October 7th.
As always, we're going to continue to cover all of the updates on this story. Stick with us. More on Rising after this.